It is a room full of history. It is a room where history has been made repeatedly. It is the room where President Franklin Delano Roosevelt gathered his cabinet at the end of the worst day of his life, December 7th, 1941, when the Japanese military attacked the United States of America at Pearl Harbor. That night, in the cabinet room, the president said he was going to Congress the next day at noontime to ask for a declaration of war. The first time you enter the cabinet room for a governing meeting, you look around and you can feel what has come before you. My first time in the cabinet room was in the first year of Bill Clinton's presidency when I was working in the Senate, and we were there to discuss the president's budget bill with the president, the vice president, the secretary of the Treasury, the Senate Majority Leader, the chairman of the Senate Finance Committee, an assorted administration, and Senate staffers like me sitting against the wall in awe. Donald Trump, surrounded by incompetents and quislings, desecrated that room once again today with a fake cabinet meeting performed badly for television cameras. Reporters have never been allowed in a real cabinet meeting, so what you're seeing when Donald Trump does it is completely fake. And what we saw once again today in the Trump cabinet room was a small-minded man in the center chair surrounded by genuflectors and worshipers, a room where no one was capable of telling the truth about anything. When the Japanese struck at Pearl Harbor and when the president went to Congress the next day and in a 5-minute speech saying that December 7th was a day that would live in infamy, asked for and got a declaration of war, America was very glad that Franklin Delano Roosevelt was the president of the United States. A week later, Japan's ally, Germany, declared war on the United States, and the president got another declaration of war against Germany, whereupon the United States of America became the first country in the world to ever embark on fighting a world war on the distant side of the Atlantic Ocean and the distant side of the Pacific Ocean at the same time. And America was very glad, and history would prove very lucky, that Franklin Delano Roosevelt was president of the United States. And tonight, the United States is at war again because Donald Trump is the president of the United States. That is why we are at war. The United States is at war again because the American president decided to start a war. And in the cabinet room today, Donald Trump proved that he is more lost in war than any American commander-in-chief who has struggled in war before, including Presidents Johnson and Nixon in Vietnam and President Bush in Afghanistan and Iraq. Donald Trump is obviously lost tactically and strategically with no idea of what to do next. And as importantly, he is, as always, lost morally. The moral bankruptcy of Donald Trump found its way into words today that no wartime president has ever spoken. I don't care.
I mean, I read a story today that I'm desperate to make a deal. If I was desperate, he'd be the first to know. Pete, let's get the hell out of there. I'm the opposite of desperate. Mm-hmm. I don't care.
Laughing about it. I don't care. Laughing about his war as he sends more troops tonight to that war. President Roosevelt was not desperate to make a deal with Hitler to end the war, but Franklin Roosevelt never sent Hitler a 15-point peace proposal in the middle of the war, as Donald Trump has done in the middle of his war. President Roosevelt had a simple demand and a non-negotiable demand of the Germans and the Japanese, 2 words, unconditional surrender. There was never a word of negotiation about that, not 1 minute of the 4 years of American involvement in World War II involved any negotiation of any kind with the enemy. But the president cared every day of World War II. There wasn't a second when President Roosevelt did not care. President Roosevelt would have done anything except negotiate to end that war sooner. He cared. He cared about ending it as soon as possible. And with a war underway, no other president has ever said, I don't care about anything in that war. Donald Trump has been claiming all week that it's the Iranians who are desperate to make a deal with him, and yet the Iranians are publicly mocking Donald Trump in what appears to be his need to make a deal to end his war because his stock market is now ordering him to end his war. And so at the end of the day, when Donald Trump tried to talk tough in the cabinet room and sounded completely incoherent and ever closer to cognitive collapse, as we will show you in video later in this program, Donald Trump announced yet another Trump pause in the Trump war, timed to allow the stock market to open tomorrow and, in Donald Trump's hope, trade all of next week during a Trump pause in the Trump war announced 11 minutes after the stock market closed today in the worst day of trading in the Trump war. The New York Times reports stocks on Wall Street on Thursday suffered their largest daily decline since the start of the war with Iran, falling as oil prices rose sharply after President Trump raised the pressure on Iran to accept terms to end the fighting. The S&P 500 fell 1.7%, putting the index on course for its fifth straight week of losses for the first time in 4 years. The price of Brent crude, the global benchmark for oil, rose roughly 5.7% to $108.01 a barrel, its highest this week. You can watch the troop movements for hints of what happens next, but so far the troop movements have been so small, including a movement of possibly 10,000 troops to the region, reported by the Wall Street Journal tonight, that it is militarily impossible to accomplish anything lasting in a country of 90 million people with 10 or 15,000 troops. And so the most likely predictive thing to watch is the stock market. The stock market is what made Donald Trump announce his war pause at 4:11 p.m. today after the stock market closed. In a new Fox poll, Donald Trump is suffering his worst disapproval numbers ever, with 59% disapproving of his handling of his job as president, 64% disapprove of how he's handling Iran, with only 33% saying the United States military action against Iran will make the United States safer in the long run. So the vast majority of Americans believe what Donald Trump is doing in Iran is wrong and will have no good, lasting effect. Meanwhile, the price of gas is skyrocketing, and Donald Trump continues to publicly prove he does not have the vaguest idea how the price of crude oil and then the price of gasoline is set by the worldwide oil market.
The amazing thing is we don't need the Hormuz Strait. We don't need it. We don't need it at all. We have so much oil. Our country is not affected by this. We have twice the amount of oil as Saudi Arabia or Russia, and soon it'll be 3 times the amount.
Everyone else in government, including most of the people in that room with him today, actually know that there is no such thing as a price of American crude oil. The United States of America does not just use American oil and pay only for American oil with an American price. There is only one price for crude oil in the world, and it is a world price. The price of crude oil is set by the world market every day, and it is skyrocketing, and that has a direct effect, as everyone in America can see when they look at the prices in their neighborhood gas stations going straight up. Senate Democrats have tried 11 times to vote for fully funding TSA, as TSA lines have gotten longer and longer. And 11 times Republican senators have all blocked that Democratic vote because Donald Trump told Senate Republicans to not vote for anything other than the bill Donald Trump wants to pass, which would require people to bring passports and birth certificates to register to vote, and would hand over every state's voter registration rolls to Donald Trump's federal government for the first time in history. But tonight, with pressure building on Republicans and Donald Trump from a public that knows TSA never shut down under Joe Biden's presidency, that Donald Trump and Republicans are to blame for the TSA shutdown, Donald Trump is now desperately ordering his new Homeland Security Secretary to divert Homeland Security funding to pay TSA workers so TSA can get back to full strength at the airports and the airports can get back to normal. The Iranian regime is watching all of this. They are watching how long it takes Donald Trump to reverse himself, whether that reversal involves the war in Iran or TSA funding or anything else. And what the Iranian regime sees when they watch Donald Trump is what the world sees: a lost, incompetent person who spends his time desperately struggling to solve the problems that he creates. And when asked today about how he is going to negotiate the end of the war that he started, he said, "I don't care." And Americans know he means, "I don't care." Americans standing in 4-hour TSA lines know Donald Trump means "I don't care" when he says "I don't care." And now even Trump voters know that when Donald Trump says "I don't care," he means "I don't care" how long the Trump voters have to stand in TSA lines. Imagine how it feels to be the mother or father or son or daughter of one of those thousands of troops headed toward Donald Trump's war zone tonight and hearing Donald Trump say, "I don't care." Leading off our discussion tonight is House Democratic Leader Hakeem Jeffries. Thank you very much for joining us tonight, Mr. Leader. I want to begin with the TSA issue, which seems to be Donald Trump's latest move on this. Is it possible for the Department of Homeland Security to actually fund TSA the way Donald Trump seems to be suggesting they will?
Yes, you know what's interesting, Lawrence, in that one big ugly bill, which of course ripped away Medicaid from at least 14 million Americans and literally took food from the mouths of hungry children, seniors, and veterans because of the fact that they enacted the largest cut to the supplemental nutritional assistance in American history. They gave $191 billion to DHS. $10 billion of that can be used any way that Donald Trump and the Department of Homeland Security wants. And so over the last 41 days, effectively, Donald Trump has chosen not to pay TSA when ordering Republicans to shut down the Department of Homeland Security. And so he's always had this ability, but clearly he wanted to hold TSA agents and the American people hostage across the country while creating chaos at airports, trying to get Democrats to back away from our position.
So, I mean, you know, I've been trying to make it clear that Senate Democrats have been voting every day to fund TSA. Every day of these long lines, Senate Democrats have been trying to vote to fund it, and Republicans in the Senate have blocked it. Sometimes it's hard to tell out there. People, you know, out there following these things, standing in a line for 4 hours in an airport. Who's to blame for this? It's those people in Washington. Tonight, Donald Trump has just said, "It's up to me. I did it, and I can now undo it." In effect, isn't that what we've learned from Donald Trump tonight?
That's exactly what we've seen. And House and Senate Democrats over the last several weeks have repeatedly made clear that we need to reopen every other aspect of the Department of Homeland Security, TSA and FEMA and the Coast Guard and our cybersecurity professionals, every other aspect of the Department of Homeland Security, other than, of course, ICE, which needs to be brought under control. And we've also made clear we are not going to fund Donald Trump's extreme and violent mass deportation machine. But Republicans who control the House, the Senate, and the presidency made the determination that they want to hold TSA agents hostage and force them for weeks now to work without pay, when Donald Trump at any point over the last 41 days could have made clear that they need to get paid. Thankfully, we've now compelled him to do just that.
So Donald Trump's statements to the Senate were two things. One, don't vote for funding TSA unless the Democrats vote for funding ICE. But also he was telling them, do not vote on anything except the voting legislation that Donald Trump wants that require passports, birth certificates, and other things to vote that we've never needed before, and also hands over every state's voting rolls to Donald Trump's Department of Homeland Security, which that does not, as far as we know, have the votes, even the necessary Republican votes in the Senate to pass it. But that's what Donald Trump has been saying the Senate should be doing instead of funding TSA.
Well, that's correct. In fact, as you pointed out, Lawrence, Donald Trump has said, don't do anything. We're dealing with an affordability crisis in the United States of America. We've got this reckless war of choice that we've got to end, that Donald Trump has gotten into. They're spending billions of dollars to drop bombs in the Middle East, but are unwilling to spend a dime to actually make life more affordable for the American people. And then on top of all of that, he's trying to jam the so-called Save America Act down the throats of the American people. This is voter suppression on steroids, and it doesn't have the votes to pass the Senate. And of course, in the House was strongly opposed by Democrats, and we will continue to do so. We're going to do everything we need to do to make sure, Lawrence, that there's a free and fair election in November. And when that happens, Democrats are taking back control of the House of Representatives, and Senate Democrats are on a path to do the same thing.
What's your reaction to Donald Trump today in the cabinet room when he's asked about negotiations to end the war that he started, and he says, I don't care?
Yeah, that was an incredible thing for him to say. Effectively, he was saying, I don't really care about the hardship that is being inflicted on the American people. We've seen gas prices are skyrocketing out of control in an environment where people are already struggling to live paycheck to paycheck. Many Americans can't thrive and can barely survive. Donald Trump could care less about it, and he said that in his own words today from the White House. At the same period of time, apparently, he could care less about the fact that thousands of troops are being put into harm's way in this reckless war of choice. And American lives, heroes, patriots, have already lost their lives up until this point, and yet Donald Trump doesn't care.
Congressman Hakeem Jeffries, thank you very much for joining us tonight.
Thank you much.
Thank you. And coming up in tonight's episode of Nobody Humiliates Donald Trump More Effectively Than Donald Trump, Donald Trump, in effect, gives himself a cognitive test in the cabinet room, live on TV, with the Iranian regime watching and judging who they are up against in Donald Trump's war. That's next. With the Iranian regime watching to judge what and who they are up against in Donald Trump's war, Donald Trump failed another can he stay awake and alert in the cabinet room test today. And remember, this was a meeting about the most important thing the cabinet can ever discuss: war.
The morale of their fighters plummeting, and we see that disconnect daily. They're privately admitting, as you said, Mr. President, very heavy losses. We know that. President Trump has given us a clear mission. Our capabilities are only going up and Iran's are plummeting. We are here to win, and we're full speed ahead.
And while he was at it, Donald Trump failed another self-administered cognitive test by being incoherent and wildly wrong about very, very simple things. Since 2018, Donald Trump has been publicly insisting that he has been taking cognitive tests and that he aced them. That's his word, aced. In 2020, the New York Times described the cognitive test that Donald Trump was boasting about as, quote, a 10-minute screening exam meant to highlight possible problems with thinking and memory. And the questions include being able to draw a clock and identifying a lion, rhino, or camel. A perfect score is 30. A score from 26 to 30 is considered normal. So a perfect score on the cognitive test that Donald Trump claims he aced is normal. The only reason to repeatedly administer cognitive tests to Donald Trump would be doctors' concern about Donald Trump's cognitive ability. Now listen to Donald Trump today. In the middle of what was supposed to be a wartime cabinet meeting, lying once again about his cognitive test.
I don't want a stupid person being president. You know, I'll say it right now. I say it because no press never reports it. I'm the only president that ever took a cognitive test. I took it 3 times. It's actually a very hard test for a lot of people. It wasn't hard for me, but it's a cognitive test. It starts off with an easy question, and by the time you get to the middle, it gets tougher. By the time you get to the end, very few people can answer those questions. They get very tough mathematical equations and things. I took it 3 times. I aced it all 3 times in front of numerous doctors that I have no idea who they are. And I was told when I went in, they said, Doc Ronnie told me this. My current doctors, who are fantastic doctors, they said, well, if you take it, you know, it's Walter Reed, it's essentially a public hospital. And if you do badly, it's probably going to get out. But I aced it. I got them all right. And one doctor said, I've never seen anybody get them all right. I've been doing the test for 20 years.
Doctors see people get perfect scores all the time on cognitive tests. All the time. Perfect scores are normal. And so, is this Donald Trump's pathological lying that we're watching, or is it his cognitive decline? Is it hallucination? Has he actually hallucinated a doctor telling him, I've never seen anybody get them all right? Is that what America's wartime president is doing? Hallucinating? Or is it just the same old pathological lying Donald Trump has been doing all of his life? It took 5 years, but eventually Donald Trump stopped lying about President Obama's birth certificate. But Donald Trump just can't give up lying about his repeated cognitive tests. Here he is 6 years ago.
If I may, sir, respectfully, in the Fox poll, they asked people, who is more competent? Whose mind is sounder? Biden beats you in that.
Well, I tell you what, let's take a test. Let's take a test right now. Let's go down. Joe and I will take a test. Let him take the same test that I took.
Incidentally, I took the test too when I heard that you passed it.
Yeah, how did you do?
Well, it's not the hardest test.
No, but
there's a picture and it says, what's that? And it's an elephant.
No. You see, that's all misrepresentation.
Well, that's what it was on the web.
It's all misrepresentation. Because, yes, the first few questions are easy, but I'll bet you couldn't even answer the last 5 questions. I'll bet you couldn't. They get very hard, the last 5 questions.
Well, one of them was count back from 100 by 7.
And let me tell you,
93.
You couldn't answer.
All right, what's the question?
Many of the questions. I'd get you the test. I'd like to give it. But
right.
I guarantee you that Joe Biden could not answer those questions. Okay? And I answered all 35 questions correctly.
One question that is not on the cognitive test is, how much does a Sharpie cost? That became relevant today as Donald Trump, in a wartime cabinet meeting, drifted off into pathological lying about $1,000 pens and Sharpies in another proof that Donald Trump does not have the attention span or the mental capacity to be commander-in-chief.
See this pen right here? This pen is an interesting example. It's the same thing. So this pen is very inexpensive, but it writes well. I like it. But I can't have the pen the way it was. You know what it is. I don't want to give too much publicity, but they do treat me well, Sharpie. So I came here, they have $1,000 pens. And you know, you hand pens out, you're signing and you hand them out, you're handing them to all these people. Sometimes you have 30, 40 people. And they were $1,000 a piece. Beautiful pen, ballpoint. 1,000, it was gold, silver, gorgeous. But I'm handing out to kids that don't even know what they're doing. What is this, Mommy? It's kids. They're getting a pen for $1,000. They have no idea what it is. And I feel guilty because I'm like, you know, I'm by nature, I don't, you know, it's the government. I love the government like I love myself economically. I want to save money. So I'm saying, this is crazy. And it had another problem. They didn't write well. So I take it out and I saw it and there's no ink. And I got all you people looking and you say, there must be something wrong with Trump. And I'm signing and there's no ink in the pen and it costs $1,000. This one, I called the guy. I said, I'd like to use your pen, but I can't have a gray thing with a big S on it saying Sharpie. As I'm signing a $1 trillion airplane contract to buy brand new fighter jets, brand new B-2 bombers, of which we just ordered plenty. I can't do that with the press. Use your pen, but I like the pen the best, but I'll sign it. I could do like Biden did, you know? Give it to somebody else to sign, or an auto pen, or maybe sign it separately in another room, but I can't use your pen. He said, well, I can make it nicer. I said, what can you do? He said, I'll paint it black. I said, that's nice. And I could even paint the White House on it, sir, if you like, in gold. Almost real gold, not bad. And I could even do your signature, sir. And by the way, this was not staged. I just saw the pen sit there. I thought of this as an example of how $25 million spent by me at the Federal Reserve Building would be a better job than $4 billion that they're spending.
The Iranian regime was watching. And then he floated into a deranged digression about the chairman of the Federal Reserve, Republican Jerome Powell, in which Donald Trump said, among other things, quote, we have a moron at the Fed, end quote. When Donald Trump finally found his way back to his beloved Sharpie, he said this.
Just to finish on this one. So I told that story to somebody and said, yeah, but it's not the same thing. I said, you're right. This one is better. It writes. So the guy said to me, you don't have to pay me, sir. I'll give them to you for nothing. I said, no, I don't want that. Let me pay you. I want to pay you. No, sir, you don't have to. You're the president of the United States. He was shocked. The head of Sharpie gets a call. I don't even know who the hell he is. He said, is this really the president? He said, no, you don't have to pay me, sir. This is such an honor. I said, nope, I want to pay you. He said, what would you like to pay? I said, how about $5 a pen? He said, that's all right, whatever the hell we agreed to. Peanuts. As opposed to 1,000. And these were $1,000 pens. And we were giving them out. Sometimes, you know, you were there for signings. I'd have 30, 40 people standing behind me. I'd give out 40 pens to people. Then somebody would say, could I have a couple extra? This way I'd go like this. Here, you want 5? Here, take 5. But the bottom line is, they're better pens. It's a business story. So for $5, could be 0, but for $5, I get a much better pen than for $1,000. And I can hand them out, and actually they become hot as a pistol, so what can I tell you? With that, could I give it to, please, a man who's done a great job at Treasury, Scott? Good luck, Scott.
Well, sir, as always, you're a tough act to follow, but that is very illustrative.
It is indeed very illustrative, as Scott Bessent just said. Donald Trump, the master negotiator, negotiating the price of a Sharpie, one Sharpie at $5. At Staples, right now, you can get a dozen for $8.99. That's 75 cents a Sharpie, right now at Staples. Donald Trump was trying to show the room what a brilliant negotiator he is on behalf of the United States government, always getting the lowest price, even on Sharpies. And Donald Trump was in a room where he and none of the other billionaires in the room had the vaguest idea what the price of a Sharpie is. None of them had any idea. And so the $5 a Sharpie sounded great to those oblivious Trump buffoons. In any presidential campaign, it is always hard to pick the moment that decided the campaign. But in 1992, when the economy was the issue and President George H.W. Bush appeared to be oblivious to prices at a grocery store checkout counter, that may have been the moment when all was lost for the Bush campaign as Bill Clinton continued to campaign on what would now be called affordability. And in this moment in the American economy, with gas prices skyrocketing in the second year of a presidency in which the central campaign promise was to lower prices, Donald Trump demonstrated his obliviousness about a price that every mother or father with kids in school knows, the price of a Sharpie, 75 cents. Oh, and those $1,000 pens Donald Trump was talking about at the White House for bill signings, they never existed. That's a lie. The pens used for bill signings before the Trump presidency were very nice, high-end ballpoint pens with a retail price of about $200. President Bill Clinton gave me one of those pens at the bill signing for that budget bill that we first began discussing in that first cabinet room meeting that I was in. Joe Biden used slightly cheaper pens for bill signings during his presidency, but they were expensive pens, not $1,000. There are much more expensive pens in this world. Donald Trump is right that $1,000 pens exist. They just never have been used by the President of the United States for bill signings. So going from a $200 pen to a 75-cent Sharpie, or even Donald Trump's wildly overpriced $5 Sharpie, could be Donald Trump's only successful cost-cutting exercise in all of government, but he's not satisfied with it. He has to lie about the $1,000 pens that never existed. The Iranian regime that Donald Trump is at war with was watching today. They watched who they are up against. And we can be sure that they found it very illustrative. Coming up, in another Donald Trump I don't care moment, he said in the cabinet room today that he expects gas prices to go even higher because of his war. That's next with Congressman Brendan Boyle. The tiniest mind ever to occupy the center chair in the cabinet room came up with this today.
Frankly, I thought the oil prices would go up more, and I thought the stock market would go down more. Hasn't been nearly as severe as I thought. I think they have confidence in maybe the American president.
That makes him the first person in history who thinks a crashing stock market and spiking oil prices are an expression of confidence in the American president. The costs of Donald Trump's war are landing on Americans after Americans have suffered from Donald Trump's illegal and unconstitutional tariffs. And last night, Donald Trump attacked the two Supreme Court justices who he appointed, who voted against his tariffs as being illegal and unconstitutional, Neil Gorsuch and Amy Coney Barrett.
The Supreme Court, that's right, of the United States cost our country, all they needed was a sentence, our country, hundreds of billions of dollars, and they couldn't care less. They couldn't care less. And not that it matters, doesn't matter at all. But two of the people that voted for that, I appointed, and they sicken me. They sicken me because they're bad for our country.
Joining us now is Democratic Congressman Brendan Boyle of Pennsylvania. He's ranking member of the Budget Committee and a member of the House Ways and Means Committee. And Congressman Boyle, I just want to begin with that burst of economic dementia at the end about tariffs. The Supreme Court decision, which is going to end up having all of those tariffs refunded to Americans, and only Americans paid them. Donald Trump claiming that this is costing America something, when in fact it's the United States Treasury illegally seizing money from Americans and now handing it back to Americans.
Yeah, that's exactly right, Lawrence. Donald Trump unilaterally imposed an over $100 billion new tax on the American people through his tariffs, a de facto national sales tax on every imported good, basically, from worldwide. Fortunately, the Supreme Court ruled 6-3 that, yes, President Trump was violating the Constitution when he did that, and now approximately $130 billion in illegally gotten gains need to be returned to the American people. And so we are actually about to receive a nice tax cut because, of course, it was originally our money that was illegally taken from us by this president.
The Center for American Progress has come up with this survey saying that the average small business importer paid $306,000 in more tariffs. Those are small businesses in your state and everywhere around the country paying $306,000 illegally to the United States Treasury. Now, Judge Eaton in the Court of International Trade ordering all of that to be paid back, while gas prices skyrocketing and Donald Trump saying today, I thought they were going to go higher, which means he's willing for them to go higher. Isn't that what that means?
You know, yeah, he's doing a heck of a job, Brownie, to use a callback from a couple decades ago. Let's have a reset with the basic facts here for Donald and anyone else listening. 4 weeks ago at this moment, the national average for a gallon of gas was $2.98 a gallon. Today, as of this morning, the national average was $3.98 a gallon. At no point previously in American history can you find a whopping $1 a gallon increase in a matter of just under 4 weeks. That is what Donald Trump's unnecessary war has brought us, on top of all of the inflation-inducing tariffs that he unilaterally imposed upon us that we just discussed. So all told, it's no surprise why inflation is going up instead of going down, which is what it was at the moment he took office 15 months ago.
Do you see anything on the horizon here that could possibly reverse this? Oil industry economists are telling us you cannot reverse the worldwide oil market in quickly after something like this.
Yeah, as someone described to me who's an analyst in this field, it only takes a day to destroy, but it can take months or even years to rebuild that infrastructure. So the longer that this goes on, we're going to be paying for it not just today and tomorrow, but for a long time to come.
Congressman Brendan Boyle, thank you very much for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
And coming up, the biggest No Kings protest ever is on the verge of turning into the biggest American protest in history this Saturday. The organizer of what could be an historic event, Ezra Levin, will join us next. Our next guest, Ezra Levin, is going to tell you where you can find your local No Kings protest on Saturday in what could become the largest single day of protest in American history, with No Kings rallies scheduled across the country. The coordinated national demonstration is aimed at Donald Trump, with Minneapolis hosting the flagship protest, but there will be more than 3,100 separate protests all across the country. The No Kings website says, masked secret police terrorizing our communities, an illegal catastrophic war putting us in danger and driving up our costs, attacks on our freedom of speech, our civil rights, our freedom to vote, costs pushing families to the brink. Trump wants to rule over us as a tyrant, but this is America and power belongs to the people, not to wannabe kings or their billionaire cronies. Joining us now is Ezra Levin, co-founder and executive director of the Indivisible Project. Ezra, it feels like you've got a really big one coming on Saturday. As I said to Jen Psaki at the beginning of the hour, people I know who haven't been to these kinds of things are telling me they're going to go on Saturday.
Lawrence, you are exactly right. Look, to put this in context, the first No Kings protest in June of last year was historic, the largest protest in American history, 2,100 events in every single state. It was incredible. It was powerful. And then we outdid ourselves for No Kings 2 in October, where we had 2,700 events. You said 3,100. I've got news for you, Lawrence. I don't think I've told anybody this on national TV yet. As of tonight, there are 3,267 protests worldwide planned for Saturday. And this isn't just me, to be clear. This isn't the Ezra Levin protest. This isn't the Indivisible protest. This is a massive group project. Got to give a shout out to Randy Weingarten, head of the AFT, but it's also Black Voters Matter, Move In for Black Lives, NAACP, Voto Latino, ACLU, and Sunrise are working with college campuses, tons of national organizations, but I think even more importantly, Lawrence, normal everyday people, nurses, teachers, IT technicians who are out in the most rural red parts of this country who are raising their hand and saying, I guess I'm going to organize my No Kings protest, which is why 95% of Americans live within about an hour of the furthest away No Kings protest to them. It's going to be massive, it's going to be powerful, and it's going to be a lot of fun.
How do you find your closest protest?
It's easy. You just text 59798. No Kings. 59798. You will get your closest protest to you. But here's my challenge to folks. Lawrence, I know everybody watching you, they're going to go to their No Kings protest. I'm counting on that. But here's a challenge. I want folks to think of the 3 people in their lives who they're not particularly political, they're not organizer type or activist type, but they don't like this war. They don't like the secret police. They don't like the cost of groceries or gas. Give them a gift. Reach out to them. Give them the gift of an invitation to be with you this Saturday. Hang out at the No Kings protest. That's how we make it historic. This is grassroots led, and we need everybody doing recruiting. So please text No Kings to 59798 and then recruit some of your friends. It's going to be great.
59798. It's right here in my notes. Wrote it down as you said it. I'm going to be giving it to friends. Ezra, you know, when I remember as a kid being able to go to sort of the tail end of the Vietnam protest, and it is a moment in history. It is something that your kids, high school kids, if they can witness this and see the American collective voice in action, it is really something you remember for a lifetime.
Look, it's an honor and a privilege to be here in the 250th anniversary of the founding of this country, a country founded on rejecting authoritarian rule by a king. And we get to be part of the movement that actually sustains that democracy, that protects that democracy from a would-be king. I think it's something we get to tell our kids and our grandkids. It's something we get to be proud of for a very long time. And it happens to be a lot of fun, too. You can bring your kids. You can bring your grandparents. You can bring your dogs and your pets. You can bring a boombox. There's going to be dancing and laughing and funny signs. I know this is serious work, Lawrence. We're fighting against authoritarianism, but you don't fight against authoritarianism without joy, because that's one thing that the authoritarians can't stand. They can't stand joy. They can't stand courage. We're going to have a lot of both of those things on Saturday.
For the rest of our lives, we will be asked by our grandchildren and by people we know for the rest of our lives, what did we do when the rise of Trump happened? This is what you can do. Ezra Levin, thank you very much for joining us tonight.
Thanks, Lawrence.
We'll be right back. Tonight's last words are no kings.